The year is 1997. Apple Computer is 90 days away from bankruptcy. The company's co-founder, who was fired 12 years earlier, has just returned as CEO. Wall Street thinks he's crazy. Michael Dell says Apple should shut down and give the money back to shareholders. But this man sees something nobody else does. Within 4 years, he'll introduce a music player that changes everything. His name is Steve Jobs, and this is the story of how an adopted college dropout became the most influential innovator of our time. What he learned will change how you think about creativity, persistence, and perfection. February 24, 1955. A baby boy was born in San Francisco to unmarried graduate students. His biological mother, Joanne Schiebel, gave him up for adoption. The adoptive parents she wanted backed out at the last minute when they saw it was a boy. They wanted a girl. Paul and Clara Jobs, a machinist and an accountant, became his parents instead. They named him Stephen Paul Jobs. Joanne almost didn't sign the adoption papers. The Jobs family wasn't college educated, and she wanted her son to go to college. Paul and Clara promised he would. They signed a pledge to save money for his education. Young Steve was difficult, hyperactive, rebellious, easily bored. In 4th grade, his teacher had to bribe him with candy and money to get him to study. But once engaged, he was brilliant. He skipped 5th grade entirely. Growing up in Mountain View, California, right in the heart of what would become Silicon Valley, Steve was surrounded by engineers. His neighbor taught him about electronics. His father showed him how to build things in the garage. Steve learned that craftsmanship mattered. Even parts people couldn't see should be made beautifully. In high school, Steve met Steve Wozniak, a computer whiz 5 years older. Woz was a genius engineer who loved building things for fun. Steve saw something else in Woz's creations. He saw products that could be sold. Their first collaboration was illegal, the Blue Box, a device that hacked phone systems to make free long-distance calls. Woz built it for fun. Steve insisted they sell them. They made a few $100s before realizing they could go to prison. But Steve learned something crucial. Hardware could be turned into profitable products if marketed correctly. In 1972, Steve enrolled at Reed College in Portland, Oregon. It was expensive, draining his parents' savings. After 1 semester, he dropped out. He felt guilty about wasting his parents' money on classes that didn't interest him. But he didn't leave campus. For 18 months, Steve hung around Reed, sleeping on friends' floors, returning Coke bottles for food money, walking 7 miles to get free meals at a Hare Krishna temple. He attended classes that interested him without enrolling. He took a calligraphy class that taught him about typography, fonts, and beautiful letter spacing. This seemed useless at the time. 10 years later, it influenced the Mac's revolutionary typography. Steve traveled to India seeking spiritual enlightenment. He shaved his head, wore traditional Indian clothes, experimented with LSD, and studied Buddhism. This Eastern philosophy influenced his thinking forever. Simplicity, intuition, the idea that less is more. These concepts would define Apple's design philosophy. In 1974, Steve took a job at Atari, the video game company. He was difficult to work with, abrasive, opinionated, hygienically challenged. He believed his vegetarian diet meant he didn't need to shower. His coworkers complained about his smell. Atari moved him to the night shift so he'd work alone. But Atari's founder, Nolan Bushnell, saw something in Steve: intelligence, drive, vision. Bushnell became an informal mentor, teaching Steve about business and entrepreneurship. Wait, here's where everything changes. In 1975, the Homebrew Computer Club formed in Silicon Valley. Hobbyists gathered to share ideas about personal computers. Woz attended and was inspired to build his own computer. He showed it to Steve, expecting him to be impressed by the engineering. Steve saw something different. He saw a product. He convinced Woz they should start a company and sell computers. Woz was hesitant. He had a stable job at HP. Why risk it? But Steve was persuasive. He could sell ice to Eskimos, as people said. They needed a name. Steve had just returned from an Apple farm commune. He suggested Apple Computer. It sounded friendly, non-threatening, better than competitors with names like Processor Technology Corporation. They'd be listed before Atari in the phone book. Simple marketing genius. April 1st, 1976. Apple Computer Company was born in the Jobs family garage. Steve was 21, was 25. They sold personal possessions to raise capital. Steve sold his VW bus for $1,500. Was sold his HP calculator for $500. That was their startup funding. Their first product, the Apple I, was basically a circuit board. Buyers had to add their own keyboard, monitor, and case. Was built them by hand. Steve convinced a local computer store to buy 50 units for $500 each. They had 30 days to deliver. Problem was, they didn't have money for parts. Steve was 25 years old and worth over $200 million. But money wasn't what drove him. He wanted to change the world. He wanted to put a computer in everyone's hands. He believed technology could empower people, enhance creativity, and transform society. The Mac was beautiful, innovative, revolutionary, but it was also underpowered and expensive. Sales disappointed. Worse, Steve's management style created chaos. He divided Apple into competing groups. He played favorites, calling some teams the A-team and dismissing others. He could be cruel, calling people's ideas shit in front of others. This is the key point. Steve's perfectionism and vision created amazing products, but his abrasiveness and controlling nature created enemies. The Apple board grew concerned. In 1985, they sided with CEO John Sculley, whom Steve had recruited from Pepsi with the famous line, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world?" At 30 years old, Steve Jobs was fired from the company he founded. He was devastated. He felt he'd failed publicly. He'd let down the previous generation of entrepreneurs. He seriously considered leaving Silicon Valley entirely. But then, something happened. I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, Steve said later. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about everything. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life. Steve moved fast and brutally. He killed 70% of Apple's products, focusing on 4: a professional desktop, a professional laptop, a consumer desktop, and a consumer laptop. He simplified everything. He convinced Microsoft to invest $150 million in Apple, ensuring Office would continue on Macs. He introduced the colorful iMac, which became a huge hit. But Steve was thinking bigger. He noticed people were buying digital music players, burning CDs, using Napster to download music illegally. The experience was terrible. Bad software, complicated devices, legal chaos. In 2001, Apple introduced the iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket. It was sleek, simple, with a brilliant scroll wheel interface. But the real innovation came in 2003 with the iTunes Store. Legal music downloads for 99 cents each. Steve convinced record labels to participate. He solved the music industry's piracy problem while giving consumers what they wanted. The iPod transformed Apple from a computer company into a consumer electronics company. It printed money. Suddenly, non-Apple people were buying Apple products. This created a halo effect. iPod buyers often bought Macs next. Then, in 2007, Steve introduced the iPhone. He called it 3 products in one: a phone, an iPod, and an internet communicator. But it was so much more. A touchscreen with no physical keyboard, apps that could be downloaded. It revolutionized not just phones, but how we live. People forget that experts predicted the iPhone would fail. Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer laughed at it. No keyboard? Too expensive? It'll never capture significant market share. They were spectacularly wrong. The iPhone became the most profitable product in history. In 2010, Steve introduced the iPad. Again, experts were skeptical. Who needs a device between a phone and a laptop? But Steve saw the future. The iPad created an entirely new category and transformed computing for millions. What made Steve's product special? Design, simplicity, integration. Everything worked together seamlessly. Hardware, software, services. Apple controlled the entire experience. This was different from Microsoft's approach of licensing software to many hardware makers. Steve's philosophy was simple. Focus on user experience, not technical specifications. Make products intuitive. Remove unnecessary features. Sweat every detail. If something doesn't serve the user, eliminate it. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. His design partner, Johnny Ive, shared this philosophy. Together, they created products that were functional art. The iPhone, iPad, MacBook Air. These weren't just gadgets. They were beautiful objects people loved to use and show off. Steve's perfectionism extended to everything: store design, packaging, advertising, even the screws inside products users would never see.